Okay. Well, here we are in May 2020. Still a little bit in the coronavirus world, and we're all gotten really comfortable with the Zoom idea. And so we are talking to Linda Jordan today, HomeVestors franchisee extraordinaire.
Hi, Ron.
And hey, and so Linda, I just, when Adam and I started talking about doing this, you were one of the first people I really thought through, because not just that you've been a franchisee for what you've reminded me is 5 years, but you have so many other things that you do. And to me, you're just a very interesting person. But so catch us up, it's 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Catch us up on your life, kind of what were you doing before HomeVestors?
Okay, sure.
What's your career been like?
So, yeah, I've had an interesting career. So prior to HomeVestors, I worked for a company, Pharmaceuticals, GlaxoSmithKline, for 27 and a half years. And in that 27 and a half years, I went from finance to human resources to the other side of the business, which was the sales side. So I was in sales operations for my last 15 plus years and had the pleasure of doing various projects. One of my famous and one that I love the most was outsourcing internationally and worldwide. So that's what I did most of the time there. But I ended up being a director of sales operations. So I had a variety of jobs or responsibilities that I had. And then in 2015, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I took that as an opportunity, a wake-up call to think about what I wanted to do with my life outside of working in the corporate world, and took early retirement. Mm-hmm. And during my recovery, I was trying to figure out, so what does Linda do next? And that's when I went to a TRIA meeting and ran into Adam. And he said, let's go and have lunch, coffee, whatever, and talk about, because he knew that I had told him that I owned rental properties. And so he said, what are you doing? And I said, this is kind of what I'm thinking. So Adam and I had lunch, and voila, I think it was like 30, 45 days later, I signed up for HomeVestors. And I chose to sign up for HomeVestors because I started in real estate probably back 2003, 2004, bought the property beside me because I wanted to control who lives in my area. But I bought it from an elderly lady who did really need some help. And so I kind of adopted her as my grandmother. Long story short, that was my first rental. And so I continued doing that while I was working corporate. But so, yeah, in 2015, so I became a HomeVestors franchisee and have enjoyed every minute of it, and most recently renewed for another 5 years.
Wow. So Linda, what was it, because you had, prior to that, you had limited real estate experience, right? I mean, you had a little bit, but what was it when you were talking to Adam and talking about, because at that point we only had 3 or so franchisees.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was in at that point. So what was it that he was saying to you that made it compelling that, hey, I want to pony up a franchise fee, and then I want to pay all these royalties every time I buy and sell a house?
So in the conversation with Adam, he brought about concerns he addressed concerns that I had in my entire real estate education that I was doing on my own. So as I said, in 2004, I was learning things on my own. So I'm a Carlton Sheets person, if you've ever heard of that.
Yes.
So I was trying to learn as much as I could. I started following Robin Thompson, who was the queen of rehab. And then I've done Ron LeGrand, so I started following him. So I followed all the older gurus that were in the business, trying to figure out, what is it that I need to do to get this up and going. even though I had rental properties, I kind of learned that on my own, but I wanted to know what's the next level. And so Adam was able to address all those questions that I had, all those concerns. I was also had prior to that had become a member of Fortune Builders, which is another real estate investment company. So again, throughout all these years, I was investing time and money into learning something that unfortunately never got me to where I wanted to be ultimately. So Adam was able to address all those concerns that I had. And when I finally, did my pros and cons, the cost to get into HomeVestors, even with the franchise fees, to me sort of balanced out because I had already spent a ton of money
Yeah.
trying to learn something on my own and doing all these seminars, from individuals that I really didn't know a lot about, but I figured they knew more than I did. But the fact that HomeVestors had a brand, it had systems in place, it had individuals that I could connect with locally, touch and feel, and bounce things off of that I may be struggling with. So I knew that there was a support system already in place. And the tools and the technology everything just made sense because I was struggling trying to do it on my own. And again, spending more money here and there. And so when you're in the early retirement stage, you're trying to make sure that you're looking at your budget and that you are spending funds effectively and appropriately. So HomeVestors just sort of lined up. And then most importantly with HomeVestors was that they already had marketing in place. I am not a marketer. And so already knowing that that was something that I could just say, here it is, and just, pay my fees or whatever my dues were to do that was just, it was just amazing. So I'm like, sign me up.
So
That was
Linda,
the rationale. But, the conversation again with Adam was, he was able to address all the concerns that I had, answer all the questions, and clarify the areas that I was struggling with. And it was because I didn't have what HomeVestors could provide. And so it just made the right decision for me to do that.
so you had tried, you had followed all the gurus, you'd gone to some of the weekend seminars,
Oh, yeah.
and okay,
Mm-hmm.
you even got involved in another, kind of home buying kind of brand.
Yeah.
So you spent money with that. What was it, now that you've been in this for 5+ years, what was it that makes HomeVestors different besides the things you've already talked about? If you could summarize for me, what was it that made the HomeVestors brand affiliation different than all the other things that you did? Because certainly you had a lot of information from that.
Yeah, I did have a lot of information. The main thing I struggled with all the other stuff was the fact that I had to create my own brand. I had to create something that would be competitive with like a HomeVestors. And I didn't have the time nor the money to do that.
I see.
Even though I had spent a lot of time and money trying to get to that point, it just still wasn't there. And, after a point of, knocking yourself over the head saying, you come up with this strategy, it didn't work. You do this strategy, you may have got a little bit, but it didn't really get you to where you needed to be. So HomeVestors had the whole package. And so I didn't have to really question whether it was the right decision or not. I just needed to clarify that I understood the process and what I was getting. So it was just very clear that, why, spend more time and money trying to create something when it's already there.
Right. So in essence, you're saying, hey, there's a 20+-year-old brand. They've got leads coming in. They've got an advertising system set up. Let me just kind of hook my real estate energy behind that engine and let it
Exactly.
kind of take me, instead of having to go and create the whole engine for yourself.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because creating it myself was not working. Nobody knew who Linda Jordan was in real estate, what my business name at the time was. And so, why recreate the wheel when it's already there, and just get on the train?
Sure. So tell me, I mean, there's always these questions, right? About, well, does a brand help you? Does it really matter? Because does anybody really know who HomeVestors is anyway? I didn't, and I was, a franchisee for various hotel chains, right? Why would you say a brand like HomeVestors works well in this industry, in this context, in this kind of small business environment we're in, versus doing it on your own?
I think HomeVestors has done an extremely good job of branding itself. Although I had no clue who they were, I had never heard of them. But the fact that, number one, they had logo apparel. There was consistency in how everyone dressed. And so, number one, that stood for itself. Then you have your marketing material, which is branded. And it just sort of communicated that same level of confidence to the potential sellers. It's like Coke and Pepsi. HomeVestors to me is like similar to that, even though I don't drink, sodas or anything of that nature, but it's been branded, it's been tried and true. And so sellers have a higher level of confidence when you're communicating that you're representing this organization, or that you're wearing your branded shirt, you're providing them with marketing material where there's a consistent message of who we are and what we do. That makes a big difference when you're out there on your own and you're trying to create a brand and there's no consistency in that brand. And then number one, you have to truly, even though you sort of believe in what you're trying to create, there's still a slight bit of doubt because there's always this competition over here. So it was just it was more comfortable for me to represent an organization who, again, as I said, has been tried and true and has a brand that stands for itself, and people can recognize it and have that sense of comfort to know that this person is going to come into my home and make me an offer. So the trust has already been established. Where on my own, I was trying to establish the trust, but most importantly, I was trying to find who those sellers were that would want my trust, and it just wasn't working well.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So Linda, tell us a little bit about. I mean, you've continued to manage properties. I mean, you still have rental properties.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure you've acquired quite a few. Tell us more about, if you don't mind, a little bit of the scope and scale of what you're doing now.
So from a rental property perspective, yes. So I have, I think it's 38 doors, last time I counted. and
you started with how many rental properties?
I started with 9.
Okay.
When I joined HomeVestors, I think it was 9 or 10. 9, because that's all that you could buy in your own name, including your own home. So that's why I started with HomeVestors. And so I still have 8 of those properties, and then I have some in another area that is managed by a property manager, and there are 2 areas that are managed by property managers, and some I manage myself. So that keeps me busy on a day-to-day basis. But I have, my tenants are all seasoned, 5+ years. And so, they all know who I am. And a lot of people will say, you shouldn't let your tenants know who you are. But that's not how I started my operation. I want people to know who I am, to know that I care about, the properties that they live in. And so even though it's managed by someone else, if something's not working, they know to call me, because I want to know if my property manager isn't doing what they're supposed to. That's just kind of who I am.
Wow.
But I want people to know who I am, and that I do care about where they live. And if things are not working well, just pick up the phone and call me.
That's great.
Yeah.
You also do fix and flips, right?
I do some fix and flips. So gosh, how many have I done? I don't even remember how many I've done. Probably about 20, I think I've done over the past 5 years. I try to average about 3 to 5 per year. So within this 5-year time period, around 15 to 20 is how many rehabs I've done. With COVID-19, I'm now focusing more on wholesales.
Yeah.
And that's just because there's a change of way things are going on. So I'm going to continue to do that through the end of the year and see where it takes me. And then if there's an opportunity for a rehab, I will definitely take that on. But that's where my focus is currently.
Because I think you have a somewhat intimate relationship with your contractor. Is that right?
Somewhat. So my contractor is my husband. Yes.
Okay.
So
Yes.
we partner really well together. I didn't think it was going to work at the beginning, but
Yeah.
he allows me to be the boss when he's working on my projects. So I use his resources for, the plumbing, electrical, and all that kind of stuff to get my jobs done. So we kind of, we partner really well together, and I try to time my projects around his schedule so I don't interfere with his business.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
And then, Linda, you've got other stuff going on. I mean, you're like, you're a politician, you're a public servant,
Yes.
you're a public speaker, you're a coach,
Yes.
you're certified with John Maxwell. I mean, what are all these things that you're doing?
So when I'm not doing HomeVestors, and that's probably between the hours of 6 and midnight, I am an elected official in the town of Butner, so I serve on that capacity. I did it for 14 years prior, and then I took a 2-year break. And so I'm back on the board for another 4 years. So I was voted for another 4 years. So I do that, so a public servant. I also do coaching and mentoring for individuals. So yes, I am a certified John Maxwell coach, trainer, teacher, and speaker. And to add to that list, I also teach classes online with Cornell University.
Oh, wow. And you do sleep sometimes, right?
Yeah, I do sleep between the hours of like 1 to 5, 6.
That's awesome. So, Linda, let's have an honest conversation here, because nothing is perfect, right? HomeVestors is not perfect.
Not perfect.
Right? And so, if you were to advise somebody who was looking at HomeVestors as a brand, and maybe they have some experience in real estate, maybe they've been toying around with some things, maybe they've done a deal or two, what advice would you give them in terms of the process they use to determine, is this a good fit for them or not?
So what I typically ask in those conversations when people ask me about, why did you go to HomeVestors, or, why do you think I should? I basically ask them, what is it that they want? They kind of, you have to know what you want out of going into any business venture. So you have to have an end goal. And then I also ask them to look at what they're doing today, and is that working for them? And if it's working for them, but they want more, then of course, HomeVestors is probably the option. But if it's not working and they want more, but they're not sure how to get there, HomeVestors is the answer. And I say that because, where can you go to find an organization that will give you the tools, the technology, the training, the continued education, the support locally and from the corporate office on a daily basis? And that's really hard to come by, especially when you're an entrepreneur. You're solo. You're in like a solo type. Well, you're a solopreneur, and it's a lonely business. So when you have individuals that are locally that you can pick up the phone and call, or contact corporate, like I'll call you or Adam, just to ask a question. When you have that opportunity to do that, to reach out to someone who can help you through something that, if you're on a buy call and you're like, oh, is the ARV kind of here or there, it's just really comforting to know that you have that support. And so I always, when I'm having those conversations with individuals, I stress that level of support that you're going to get. And I also just let them know that, you get what you pay for. And so sometimes, people may look at, well, if I have to buy into a franchise, I don't want to spend all this extra money. So I just sort of narrow it down to look at what you're getting. And if you're going to spend this amount of money anyway and not get those results, why not focus it and put your efforts on something where you're going to get the results, that there's proven data to show that HomeVestors does what it says. And so that's kind of how those conversations go. Does that answer your question?
It does. I'm curious to add one little PS there, and I hope this is not too personal, but what is your end goal?
My end goal is to, within the next 5 years, be financially free. That is my end goal. And so I do know and strongly believe that I can do that through the HomeVestors business. And so, you know, my ultimate goal, of course, is to always leave a legacy, and that's for my daughter, so that, you know, she will have a better life. She won't have to maybe work as hard as mama has done over the years. You know, I started my first job in the state of North Carolina, coming from Virginia, making $12,000 a year. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've died and gone to heaven.
Yeah.
And so, you know, she's 26. And so I want to leave that legacy so that, you know, when I'm moved on, she can pick it up and carry that on and, you know, do whatever she chooses to do in real estate and make a better life for herself.
What a great story.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anything else you'd want to add?
I just say that, you know, I have really enjoyed, you know, HomeVestors. It was a little scary in the beginning because I wasn't sure what to expect, you know, going off for a week in corporate training and meeting new people, because, you know, I am an introvert.
Okay.
So statistics say. And so I was a little scared and nervous about, you know, how people were going to respond. But the day that I put on that HomeVestors branded shirt and went into my first buy call appointment, all those fears kind of went away. You know, it's, you know, they knew HomeVestors, they had calls, so they knew who I was with the branded shirt, and I passed on to the seller, you know, my binder, and I just felt this comfort, and we just had a real conversation. And so I haven't looked back a day since.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Wonderful story. Thank you so much
Well,
for
you're quite
talking with
welcome.
me. And that's really, really awesome that you
Oh.
shared your story with us today.
Well,
But
I don't
okay.
mind, my pleasure.
Well, I'm going to stop the video right now, and then we'll chat a little bit offline as well.
Sure.